Every spring without fail the same thing happened. The trees in my backyard would bloom thick and green, blocking out the sky in the most beautiful way possible. Birds nested in the branches, squirrels played tag across the limbs, and the shade kept my house cool even in the dead summer heat. I loved those trees. They were old, sturdy, and honestly the main reason I bought this house in the first place. But Karen, the self-appointed empress of the HOA and professional busybody with too much time and too many opinions, had other ideas. She wanted them gone, not trimmed, not pruned, gone, chopped down, cleared out, erased from existence. Why? Because they blocked her view, her precious unobstructed view of absolutely nothing. Welcome to Juicy Revenge Club. Make sure you like and subscribe for more unbelievable HOA drama and revenge stories. The first time she brought it up, I thought she was joking. We were at a neighborhood barbecue, one of those forced social gatherings where everyone pretends to care about each other's lawns and deck furniture. Karen cornered me by the grill holding a glass of Chardonnay like it was a weapon. She smiled, that tight-lipped smile she reserved for people she was about to steamroll. "Your trees," she said casually, like we were discussing the weather, "they're really getting out of hand." I blinked. "Out of hand? They're trees, Karen, that's what they do. They grow." Her smile didn't waver. "They block my view. I used to be able to see the park from my bedroom window. Now all I see is branches." I stared at her. The park was 2 streets over. Even without my trees, she'd need binoculars and a stepladder to see anything remotely park-related. But I kept my tone polite. "They've been there for decades, Karen. Way before either of us moved in." She waved that off like it didn't matter. "Things change, I'm sure you understand. You should really consider trimming them back. Or better yet, removing a few. It would improve the whole neighborhood aesthetic." I laughed, actually laughed. Because what else do you do when someone suggests you destroy perfectly healthy trees for their imaginary view? "I'll think about it," I said, which is polite speak for absolutely not. But Karen wasn't the type to take a hint. Over the next few weeks she escalated. First came the passive-aggressive comments during HOA meetings. Some homeowners really need to maintain their properties better. Overgrown vegetation can be such an eyesore. Then the emails. Friendly reminders about tree maintenance and property standards with links to local tree removal services. Then the letters, formal, typed, printed on HOA letterhead and signed by Karen herself as board president, each one more insistent than the last, but I held firm. Those trees weren't hurting anyone. They were healthy, beautiful, and completely within my rights to keep. The HOA bylaws said nothing about removing trees for aesthetic purposes. I checked, twice. Karen, however, wasn't interested in bylaws. She was interested in getting her way. And when I refused to budge, she did what she always did. She weaponized the HOA. Suddenly I was getting violation notices. My grass was too long. My mailbox needed repainting. My driveway had a crack that posed a safety hazard. None of it was true, of course. My lawn was pristine, my mailbox sparkled, and the only crack in my driveway was a hairline fracture you'd need a magnifying glass to find. But Karen didn't care about truth. She cared about pressure. And she was very good at applying it. The fines started small. $20 here, $50 there, nuisance amounts designed to annoy rather than bankrupt, but they added up. And every single one came with a note suggesting that compliance with HOA standards, including tree removal, would result in the fines being waived. It was extortion dressed up in bureaucratic language. I fought back. I appealed. Every fine provided photographic evidence that my property was in perfect condition and even hired a lawyer to send a strongly worded letter. The fines stopped, temporarily, but Karen wasn't done, not even close. She started a petition. Grassroots activism, Karen style. She went door to door with a clipboard and that same tight smile, collecting signatures from neighbors who either agreed with her or were too intimidated to say no. The petition demanded that I remove or significantly trim my trees for the betterment of the community. When she presented it at the next HOA meeting, she had 40 signatures. 40, out of a neighborhood of maybe 60 homes. I sat in that meeting room surrounded by people I'd waved to for years and realized most of them had thrown me under the bus without a second thought. Karen stood at the front of the room holding her petition like a trophy. As you can see, she announced, "The community has spoken. These trees are a problem. They block views, reduce property values, and create unnecessary shade that affects neighboring yards." I wanted to stand up and call it what it was. A lie. A power play. A personal vendetta wrapped in fake concern for the neighborhood. But I stayed quiet, because I knew the board was already in her pocket, and sure enough they voted 4-1 in favor of requiring me to remove at least 3 of my trees. The reasoning: community standards and aesthetic consistency. I had 30 days to comply, or face escalating fines that started at $500 and doubled every week. I left that meeting furious. Not just at Karen, but at the neighbors who'd signed her petition, at the board who'd caved to her demands, at the whole broken system that let one person with too much free time dictate what I could and couldn't do on my own property. But I wasn't going to roll over, not this time. I spent the next 2 weeks researching. I called arborists, environmental agencies, even a lawyer who specialized in property rights, and I learned something interesting. Those trees on my property, they were protected. Not by the HOA, but by the city. They were heritage trees over 70 years old and classified as environmentally significant. Removing them without a permit was illegal, and getting a permit nearly impossible unless the trees were diseased, dangerous, or dead. Mine were none of those things. I filed a formal complaint with the city's environmental office, and within days an inspector showed up. He walked my property, took measurements, examined the trees, and confirmed what I already knew. They were healthy, protected, and absolutely not going anywhere. The city sent a letter to the HOA. Any attempt to force the removal of these trees would violate municipal code and result in significant fines for the HOA itself. I made copies of that letter, lots of copies, and I handed them out at the next meeting with the biggest smile I could manage. Karen's face went from smug to purple in about 5 seconds. "This is ridiculous," she sputtered. "You're hiding behind technicalities." "I'm hiding behind the law," I replied calmly. "Something the HOA should probably familiarize itself with before issuing illegal demands." The board backpedaled immediately. They rescinded the tree removal order, apologized for the misunderstanding, and even waived the fines they'd tried to stick me with. Karen, however, was seething. She didn't say a word for the rest of the meeting, but her glare could have melted steel. I thought that was the end of it. I really did. The trees stayed, I stayed, and Karen's precious view remained obstructed. But Karen wasn't the type to let things go. She stewed, she plotted, and she waited for her moment. That moment came 3 months later during the worst storm our area had seen in years. The wind howled like a living thing. Rain came down in sheets so thick you couldn't see across the street. Thunder rattled windows and lightning turned the sky electric. I spent most of the night awake, listening to branches scrape against the roof and praying nothing would come crashing through. When morning finally came, the neighborhood looked like a war zone. Branches everywhere, shingles torn off roofs. One mailbox had been ripped clean out of the ground and was lying in the middle of the street like a fallen soldier. And then I saw it. One of my trees, the biggest, oldest, most beautiful one, had split right down the middle. Half of it was still standing, the other half had fallen. Straight through Karen's roof. I stood in my yard staring at the destruction. Part of me felt genuine horror. Nobody wants to see their neighbor's house damaged. But another part of me, the part that had endured months of harassment, fines, and petitions, felt something else entirely. Irony, poetic justice, karma with a sense of humor. Karen emerged from her house like a storm herself. She was screaming before she even reached the sidewalk, her voice cutting through the wind and rain that still lingered. "You did this," she shrieked, pointing at me like I'd personally thrown the tree through her roof. "You and your stupid trees, this is your fault." I didn't respond. What could I say? The tree had fallen. It was an act of nature, a freak storm, bad luck. But Karen wasn't interested in logic. She wanted blood. She called the police. She called her insurance company. She called the HOA. And then she called a lawyer. Within hours, I had a letter threatening legal action for property damage, negligence, and emotional distress. Karen wanted me to pay for everything. The roof, repairs, the damaged furniture, the temporary housing while her house was fixed. She even tried to claim the tree was diseased and I'd knowingly allowed a hazard to remain on my property. I called my own lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman who'd helped me with the city complaint. She reviewed Karen's claims and laughed. Actual laughter. "This is absurd," she said. "Acts of God aren't your responsibility. The tree was healthy, the storm was unprecedented, and you're not liable for natural disasters." She drafted a response, polite, professional, and utterly devastating. It pointed out that Karen had spent months demanding I remove the very trees that were now the subject of her complaint. It included copies of her petition, her emails, and the HOA meeting minutes where she'd called my trees a blight on the neighborhood. And it noted that if anyone was negligent, it was the HOA for attempting to force illegal tree removal against city regulations. Karen's lawyer went silent. Her insurance company covered the repairs. And the HOA quietly distanced itself from the whole mess. But Karen wasn't done, not yet. She showed up at my door one evening about a week after the storm. Her face was tight, her arms crossed, and her voice was cold. "You think you won," she said. "You think this is over?" I looked at her, tired, so tired of the drama, the fights, the endless back and forth. "Karen," I said quietly, "I didn't want any of this. I just wanted to keep my trees. You're the one who turned it into a war," she laughed. "A bitter, brittle sound? A war? You have no idea. I'm going to make sure everyone knows what kind of neighbor you are, what kind of person you are." She turned and walked away, and I knew she meant it. Over the next few weeks, Karen launched a campaign. She posted in the neighborhood Facebook group claiming I'd refused to maintain my trees and her damaged roof was proof of my negligence. She sent emails to every board member demanding new rules about tree maintenance and liability. She even tried to get a special assessment passed that would require all homeowners with large trees to carry extra insurance. But something had shifted. The neighbors who'd once signed her petition stayed quiet. The board who'd once rubber-stamped her demands pushed back. And the few people who did speak up, they spoke up for me. One neighbor pointed out that Karen had been harassing me for months. Another noted that the storm had damaged half the street and singling me out was ridiculous. Even the guy across the street who'd always been neutral posted a comment defending my right to keep my trees. Karen's campaign fizzled, her credibility shot, and slowly, painfully, she realized she'd lost, not just the fight over the trees but the support of the neighborhood she'd tried so hard to control. The final board meeting was almost anticlimactic. Karen demanded one last time that new tree regulations be put in place. The board voted, unanimous no. She stormed out and I haven't seen her at a meeting since. My trees, the one that fell, was removed safely. The others are still standing tall and green and blocking Karen's view just like they always have. And every spring when they bloom I sit on my porch with my coffee and smile, because sometimes the trees win. The end. Please like and subscribe for more HOA drama. Do you think Karen got what she deserved? Comment below and let me know your thoughts.